Much for coming. It's very much a packed house and it's hot, so thank you all for coming and listening to these movements. Let me turn off the music. How about that? All right, y'all. So welcome everybody to this event. It's called The End of Policing, Abolitionism in the Bay Area. The goal of the event is to learn more about abolitionism, why it is necessary, and more importantly, why it is practical and beneficial. We'll be doing so from people representing campaigns advancing abolitionism in the Bay Area, as well as Alex Vitale, who authored the book, The End of Policing. This has been organized by Political Science and Criminal Justice Studies here at SF State, the battleground that produced ethnic studies. There you go. It's particularly significant given this moment where Chesa Boudin, who has made commitments, overt commitments, to end racialized mass incarceration of working class people, and to make commitments also to hold the privileged and the powerful, from police to landlords to corporate boardrooms. It's particularly important we discuss this as he was elected this past week. The success of his campaign is at once an indictment and a referendum to end immiseration, mass incarceration, deportation, and gentrification. Antagonisms that the people of Frisco, many of our students in this room, know too well. My name is Cesar Rodriguez. I'll be your bus driver this evening. I'm son of Berta Chavez and Miguel Rodriguez, husband to Emma Gutierrez, and friend to all who support the self-determination of third and fourth world peoples around the world. I feel most at home when I see the fog kiss the southwestern side of San Bruno on Uriburi Ohlone land, and I'd like to acknowledge that the land we are gathering on is unceded Yelamu Ohlone land. In the spirit of internationalism, I invite us all to stand in solidarity with the self-determination of indigenous peoples around the world, particularly those in Bolivia who are enduring a right-wing military coup. And with that all being said, I'd like to see the ground to Juan Ateo, who will lead us in a blessing to help convene this space.
I want to thank you all for allowing me to take space up in this room as I share this struggle with everyone who's here and all those who couldn't be here as well. I'm humbly offering a prayer in recognition of the land that we stand on. And before I share some words and intentions, I also want to recognize that although I am an indigenous person in the diaspora of this continent, I am also just a guest on this land, right? And for us, it's very important to now more than ever center, uplift, and follow the leadership of local indigenous voices on the front lines of multiple fights for justice, including that against state-sanctioned violence. Especially in the era of 45, we must do our part to name and visibilize those who the system tries to erase and specifically also benefits from their land. Today, as we unite in struggle, it's important that we honor the Ohlone and Bay Miwok indigenous people of the Bay Area and Northern California as the original caretakers of this land. And I thank you all for being here as people who have answered the call for action, answer the call to the responsibility we have to the land, to each other, and to our futures. This fight for third world liberation, this fight against white supremacy, capitalism, and systemic violence is long, hard, and uphill. But I'm confident, and our elders are confident, that together, when we stand firmly committed to our values, that we can build a dynamic movement for justice, transparency, and accountability. And I wanted to offer, I brought this concha in our culture of the Aztec people of the Mexica of Mexico. We use this as a way to call upon the ancestors to come and guide our fight, because we understand that we're up against a lot, right? And when we come up against difficult moments, we gather strength from our ancestors, from our culture, from our traditions, from our elders to be able to continue and advance the fight that our next generations need for us to be able to thrive. And so I ask that you participate in a moment of setting intentions for our fight so that we can have the grounding necessary to be able to give thanks to the land and thanks to those whose shoulder we stand on as we continue this fight for justice on multiple fronts. I'm going to call on the 4 directions, and I intentionally wanted to bring the concha to below the 4 directions because I know that we're in a library. We're supposed to be quiet, right? But as an indigenous person who's exploring my own identity, I think it's really important that we take up space when we're in these institutions, right? That we walk with pride, and that we are not ashamed to use our culture in these institutions that has tried to erase our cultures. And so I want to ask you all to please stand if you're able to join us. We usually typically start off to the east, so you all are in the right direction. We're going to face the east. And I'll share a little prayer in each direction as we try to ground ourselves before starting this evening. And I thank you all for being willing to open your hearts to this prayer and this intention for the sake of collective and third world international liberation. To the east, we usually give thanks to the energy of the men, the energy of the sun, all those in our communities, past, present, and future, the energy, that fire that we hold in our hearts to be able to sustain this fight when moments get difficult, so that we can find that clarity and remember that we are that voice that the system so desperately wants to silence. I invite us all to turn to the west. The west represents the direction of the women, the direction of the moon, the direction of water. All the women, past, present, and future, who have held us, who have given us life, who have been caretakers of the land, of our communities, of our cultures. All the guidance and the leadership that come from the women who have fought in the front lines and who have also been silenced in their fight and in their role in our movements. May we uplift the voices of women so that we can continue advancing this fight. I invite us all to take a turn and direct towards the north, towards the windows. The north is the direction of our elders, the direction of the winter, the direction of wisdom that we inherit from our elders, those who continue to protect these traditions, to continue to protect these ways of life, for us to have perspective in an ever-changing environment, in an ever-changing society, to remember to humanize ourselves and to humanize the young people in our communities. And I ask us all to turn to the south. This is the direction of the children, the direction of our youth, the direction of innocence, which is in all of us, the child in all of us, for us to remember that we're upholding this fight for their future, for their health, for their ability to thrive and continue and pick up the baton where we leave it. Lastly, I invite us to just make one full circle, which is the fifth direction, the balance, the synergy, the duality of all of these directions, that life is very complex, but it's about honoring all of these elements, honoring all of the people and us working together collaboratively to be able to fight for justice. I also want to say that I'm praying for everyone here in your work. We're all part of the big puzzle that we need to be piecing together. And I'm praying for your health, for your clarity, and for the many collaborations that have already started and those that are yet to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Juana. We're here discussing contemporary local abolitionist projects which are made necessary given the forms of death produced by the violence in the state. So one more step, in order to convene this space, we're going to recall the lives taken from us by state violence in order to remind us why we gather here today. I will call out the name of a person taken from us, and I ask those of you who are here with me to respond by calling presente. In other words, in recalling their names, we are asserting that they are present with us, that we refuse to let them disappear into the forgotten, and that we continue to struggle for justice in their name. Amilcar Perez Lopez.
Presente.
Alejandro Alex Nieto.
Presente.
Dale Stewart Wilkerson.
Presente.
Derek Gaines.
Presente.
Duwan Armstrong.
Presente.
Jessica Nelson Williams.
Presente.
Joshua Pollock.
Presente.
Joshua Pollock, pardon me.
Presente.
Kayla Moore.
Presente.
Icky O'Neill.
Presente.
Kenneth Harding.
Presente.
Luis Gongora Pat.
Presente.
Mario Woods.
Presente.
Peter Yin Wu.
Presente.
And everyone who has been taken from us by state violence. So listen, I had some words to share, but I'm going to make it brief in order to get to our speakers. We're here to learn more about abolitionism, and we have some folks who have been associated with critical resistance, so they can correct me if I'm mistaken, they can throw a shoe at me or what have you, right? If I'm mistaken here, right? But here's how I understand abolitionism, and folks can flesh this out a bit more. Abolitionism entails our communities continuously developing our democratic capacities to pursue self-determination. And here I think of a poster by Leonard Library. The artist can always say things much better than us academics, I'll say. The only secure community is an organized community. Secondly, I understand abolitionism as a cultural project, one of undoing the cultural logics that have been steeped in racism, that make everything from homeless-proof architecture to voting for law and order candidates seem necessary and commonsensical. It's about undoing those logics. Third, it's a political project of exposing and challenging the power of groups that materially benefit from the prison industrial complex, from media that profits from salacious crime stories, to wealthy landowners who sell their worst land for the best prices so governments can build prisons. And finally, I think is most important for our conversation today, I understand abolitionism as an effort to reclaim the social wage, that's to say our public tax dollars, which are being weaponized against us at this moment. So instead of our tax dollars being redistributed upward into government institutions to private companies in order to buy the goods and services necessary to surveil, capture, cage, deport, and even kill people, so rather than see our money going towards our death and containment, our money should be going towards, be redistributed downwards into life-affirming institutions, from healthcare to education to public parks and beyond. And we're in a really rich moment where grassroots activists and a few good intellectuals are translating the proposal of abolitionism into a living reality. Which brings us to our guests who are doing this kind of work. First, we'll have Jade Rivera of the End Police Violence Collective, Amber Akemi Piatt of the Audit Ahern campaign, Nick DeRenzi and Andrew, I'll make sure, Szeto, the No New, I'm sorry, it's the nerves, man, it's the nerves. Of the No New SFGL Coalition, and finally batting cleanup, we have Alex Vitale, a sociologist who's been listening to and learning from social movements, such as those represented by our guests, in order to write the book, The End of Policing. All of them here are here to help us learn how abolitionism is not only necessary, but practical and beneficial for all of us. So we'll hear their campaigns. Hopefully we'll have time for a Q&A. We'll just take it from there. So please put your hands together and please make Jade feel welcome. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Buenas tardes. For folks in the back, there's actually, for folks in the back, there's actually room up here if you want to come to the front. It's about an hour and a half. You can come sit here. Don't be scared. Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Jade Rivera and I'm super excited to be here today with y'all at San Francisco State. I am an educator from San Francisco. San Francisco State is my alma mater. I graduated from the Community Health Education program here, laced up mostly by Ethnic Studies program, the SS Studies, now Latino Studies, and I also did the Master's Public Health program here as well. I'm also former faculty with the Metro College Success Program, and Metro's in the house. So I'm glad to be here, and just to give you all context with what we're doing here today. So I'm co-author of the American Public Health Association policy statement that names police violence as a public health issue. I'm part of a collective of public health researchers, teachers, community practitioners who are committed to anti-racist and anti-oppressive health work. And we understand health disparities today to be direct reflections of deep-rooted historical injustices in our world. In 2016, we challenged the leadership and membership of the American Public Health Association to name and address police violence as a public health issue, and that last year we were able to pass that policy. And it's a policy that namely names law enforcement violence as most impacting marginalized communities: Black, Latino, Indigenous, people with disabilities, immigrant, LGBTQ, people experiencing homeless, people who use drugs, and people with mental illness. And just to give you context as to where this started, for me personally, I'm from a community impacted by economic inequity and mass incarceration. And I was personally organized by my community to participate in the Justice for Alex Nieto campaign. Alex Nieto was a young man, Latino man, who was shot and murdered by San Francisco Police Department a few blocks from his home at Bernal Hill, which is our sacred space in San Francisco. For those of us in the mission of Bernal Hill, that's where we go to chill, meditate, all the things. And so that was, for us in San Francisco, we deeply understand gentrification, actually the role of law enforcement in gentrification. We have a slide here of an event where people held down in front of the police station, the Mission Police Station, calling for transparency and accountability for those murders. So we also know that in higher education right now, spending has decreased from the 80s to about, it has significantly decreased from the 80s, right? That's higher ed, that's K-12 as well, most specifically in California. At the same time, we've had a rise, 445% increase from 1982 to 2007 in policing funding, right? And so we have to understand and think about the context in which our public resources are going. But I want to know a little bit about folks in this room. So raise your hand if you are a student. Folks, students, all right. Raise your hand if you're faculty or staff here. Raise your hand if you're visiting from off campus, former student. You came to say what's up. Thank you all for joining us. Raise your hand if you know of a San Francisco State student who has been unjustly harassed at the hands of law enforcement. That's racial profiling, being injured by police or shot. So look around, right? That's a lot. I, as a faculty member, have asked this question in my class and have been humbled to silence and at times humbled to tears to hear what the responses are of students here at San Francisco State. And we haven't ever had like a research project like what are the impacts of racialized police violence towards students at San Francisco State, not necessarily on campus, but in their lives. And thinking about where we put research. So let's get into it. So the American Public Health Association is the largest public health association actually in the world, and it has 25,000 members. And it regularly produces policy statements to align with legislation and create priorities for public health research and legislation. And so for us, what happened was that around 2015, we had It was Liz Kroboth, Emma Rubin, and myself, and we were studying actually here at San Francisco State, doing a project looking at police violence, and we're studying San Francisco SFPD. And at the same time, we were also hearing really clearly the calls from the street, the calls from movement to really stand in whatever positions we were in to create change, right? And to really address the issues. So we had Movement for Black Lives, Black Youth Project in Chicago, Critical Resistance, Youth Justice LA, among many other family and community organizations who were asking people to not remain silent in the face of injustice. And they were also providing very liberatory frameworks on solutions, not just talking about what the problem was, but how we can really resolve it. And so we were looking at that, and we're looking at interventions around creating, from a public health perspective, how do we create safe and healthy and self-determined communities? And what we really landed on was that the need to reduce the role of policing in the lives of marginalized communities. And so around that time, we were asked by other membership in the organization to rewrite a statement. And so really our objective at that time was to bring a critical dialogue to the public health world and field through this project, right? That we were going to write this. We weren't sure if it was going to pass, but we just wanted folks to be engaging. We wanted public health to be engaging in this conversation, and we really wanted to challenge status quo dominant narratives on public safety and what community health looked like. And we also thought that public health had a role in terms of how we resource and look at and create data and research. So at that same time, we had a lot of movement going on as well. While we were doing the research, we had to update the numbers for San Francisco because between fall, I think it was 2016 or 15, and December, 3 more people were shot and killed by SFPD. We had a uprising in our community. We had Frisco 5 making real demands of our public officials around what we wanted, where we want our public resources. And so that was happening as well, to provide context. And then, click to the next slide. So a little bit about what the statement has. So we're going to talk a little about the statement, what some of the key takeaways are. So police violence is a public health issue. The scope of the issue is oftentimes described as like injuries, death. Those are what we see on kind of in the media, but there's also other impacts as well, and those are at community and individual level around mental health, trauma, stress, anxiety, depression. These are also harms experienced by people, and it's not just around that it happens to you as an individual. We have data and research that shows if it happens in your community, or if you see someone being unjustly harassed or harmed by police, that you may have a traumatic experience as well. And that it disproportionately impacts marginalized communities. So some of the key frame takeaways are, I'm just looking at the time. Okay, some of the key takeaways and framings are decriminalizing, and we understand that we, in order for communities to be safe, that we must re-understand, relook at how police interact with people, and really to reduce that. And so through decriminalizing, let's say homelessness, sex work, drug use, immigration status, and minor traffic violations, we really eliminate laws that provide pretext for contact with police. And this is really a critical step for addressing the rate of police violence, is to repeal some of these laws that give police purview over interacting with marginalized communities. Another key piece is transparency and accountability. The statement calls for documenting and reporting data on law enforcement violence, ending laws that shield law enforcement from investigation and public information disclosure and access, and really demanding full public disclosure of police violence investigations via public databases. And we understand that policing in many communities has failed to deliver public safety, and that if you want to know more around the transparency and accountability, Campaign Zero website has some really great stuff. So folks doing this kind of work, they've really broken it down, and they're looking at police unions, etc. Okay, and then divesting from harm and trauma. Now, when we think about where our public resources go to, we want as just people who care about people, but especially if you are from and live in marginalized communities, we would like to divert from harm and trauma and really put those public resources into investing in communities, right? It's not like we have fully invested housing plans. We need that. Education, jobs, economic equity, that we can actually reframe how we think about public resources to really invest in communities and the needs that communities are calling for. The statement also challenges some of the popular reforms, and I'm hoping Alex will get more into that. But there are many reforms that I think oftentimes are thought of as feel good, and for those of us in social service, you know, we always want to do the least amount of harm. We want people to experience with service workers, you know, the best experience that they can have. So we think about things like implicit bias training. That sounds good, right? We don't have the data to back up that that's actually an effective strategy, and at the same time, it further contributes towards policing budgets. Other popular reforms include tasers, community policing, and we haven't found that these types of reforms really address misconduct, and that's because they don't address the power imbalances in laws and the laws in places that protect misconduct and behaviors. And we see those resources more best utilized in other types of services. I'm thinking about in San Francisco, I think they're putting in $7 million for tasers. And, you know, I think anybody who's been to public school in San Francisco, we could say, I think we know it's a fool with $7 million. So, where are we on the time? Okay, so a little bit about the strategy that we worked within the American Public Health Association, and I want folks thinking too, like, where in your position, or if you're a student or a faculty member, or whatever work you do, where are the places that you could create and push on creating change, right? American Public Health Association, I think, in a lot of ways is what might be maybe like a status quo type of professional social service organization, not necessarily left, not necessarily progressive, but within it has a different membership and different people with different views, conservative all the way to left and progressive, and everything in between. And so we wanted to really, we thought that that was an arena for us to push and think about pushing these types of ideas. We wanted to think about kind of identifying allies within the organization, folks who do think about this, and then folks who care and want to create change in the world and believe in social justice, but need to be engaged, right, in these conversations, and need to be challenged around our thinking around these. And so I invite you to think about, you know, organizations that you may be part of, student organizations, etc. When you go into your fields, right, the nurses have done some, the California Nurses Association has done some badass work around state level policy change, right? And so that, and you wouldn't think, you're like, oh, nurses, right? So thinking about like where we can push to create change. Another aspect that we use within the kind of organizing strategy is that we also partnered with organizations outside of the association who weren't necessarily public health, but folks either doing grassroots work or doing work with marginalized communities, service work. And that was important too, to bring to the association and say, yo, this is what time it is outside of the organization. We think that this is important. So next slide. Okay, so how this statement's been used, a few ways. There's the Justice Study research project, and they're looking at some of the research gaps that public health and the medical community have around addressing police violence, around what are people's real experiences. Next slide, I think we have folks, the American Public Health Association had their conference in Philadelphia last week, and we had people presenting. For folks in the room, 2020, APHA, the American Public Health Association, will be here in San Francisco. So I urge you to kind of see what's up with that. But we're also going to be doing some programming around that, and we'd love to partner with people in this room, partner with organizations in this room around. We have 18,000 public health workers coming to San Francisco. They're coming to our city. Let's show them what time it is. So have a wonderful evening, and I'll pass the mic to Amber.
Hi, good evening. How's everyone doing? It's a little warm. My name is Amber Akemi Piatt. I am the Health Instead of Punishment Program Director at Human Impact Partners, who you all saw on the last slide. I also organize with the Public Health Justice Collective here locally in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm part of the Audit Ahern Coalition. I'll tell you a bit more about us, but we are calling for an independent financial and performance audit of the Alameda County Sheriff's Office because of the egregious health and human rights abuses that we see his department overseeing. Next slide. So who are we? We are a coalition of 50 plus organizations strong. We have a steering committee made up of the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, California Immigrant Youth Justice Alliance, or CIJA, Urban Peace Movement, Causa Justa, Just Cause, and the Justice Reinvestment Coalition of Alameda County. I just want to shout out that I know that I saw Jose Bernal in the back. He's one of our badass organizers. Sorry, I know there's a child in the room. I should not cuss. I apologize in advance if that happens again. One of our brilliant organizers, and I just want to name that he's in the room with us too. And yeah, so we have a number of organizations that support this campaign, that are in this coalition. We also have the support of a number of elected officials, including State Senator Nancy Skinner, who represents part of the East Bay, as well as the Oakland City Council and Berkeley City Council. And I just want to pause here for a moment and acknowledge that, coalition work is really difficult, right? And for folks who know and who've been in coalitions, you know that this is like really deep work. And I want to acknowledge that part of why we have a steering committee and strategy committee is because we're a multiracial coalition. And we know that the Sheriff's Office, the carceral state, the police state, particularly harms Black and Brown communities, Indigenous communities, as was lifted up by Jade and our opening speaker, who gave a prayer and blessing. And we wanted to make sure in the infrastructure of our coalition that we were centering the leadership of folks who are directly harmed by the Alameda County Sheriff's Office, and that even though multiple folks are coming to the table with different skills, experiences, ability to show up in that space, we need to do extra care to make sure that we are protecting the leadership of folks who are most directly harmed. Next slide. Okay. So given that the framing for this event is around abolitionism, I can't speak for the entire coalition, every organization in the coalition, but I can speak for my own program, right? And I wanted to just introduce this. I think Jade did a brilliant job really explaining why, for me, I think the practice of public health actually demands that we believe in a world without prisons and jails and policing. But the field of public health isn't necessarily there yet, And yet, for our program, we wanted to put forward a vision statement for the world and society that we're trying to create, right? We needed to make sure that we were able to paint a picture for what we were fighting for, not just what we were fighting against. So our program vision, which might have a lot of animation and require a lot of clicking, I am so sorry. Go ahead. Okay, oh no, I put it all on that effort. Okay, so our vision statement, which I want to read to you and invite you to sort of like conjure up the pictures that come to mind for you, are that we envision a society where all people are healthy and free. Now what that means to us is we would be in a society where we wield our collective resources to help, never to punish or hurt. Where all people get the care and assistance they need to repair any harms they have caused, to heal historical and ongoing pain, and to grow in community together. Where there is no need for prisons, jails, detention centers, or policing, and where all people can thrive. So for us at Human Impact Partners, when we're talking about our health instead of punishment work, this is the world that we're trying to build toward, and it is why we are involved in this campaign to secure an independent financial and performance audit of our county sheriff's office. Next slide. Thank you. So why must we audit the Alameda County Sheriff's Office? I guess before I even go there, I'm curious, obviously we're in San Francisco, but do folks live or work in Alameda County? Like, raise your hand if you live, work in Alameda County, grew up in Alameda County. Okay, and I know there's an overflow room or something, and this is being live streamed, so like, acknowledge there might be hands other places. But there's actually a good amount of folks who have some relationship to Alameda County, either current or previous. And so this is probably not new news to especially the folks who've lived in Alameda County, and perhaps here too, because we know that the sheriff is actually getting some pretty national, infamous attention. But there are two sides to this audit, right? The financial and the performance. So I'll start with the financial, which is to say that over the last decade, we've seen that the daily jail population, so the number of people who are inside of our jails in the county on any given day, has decreased by about half, which is amazing. It decreased by about 45%. And that's because of a lot of the tremendous organizing and advocacy that many of y'all have been involved in, right? We've been able to decarcerate our county. And yet, over that exact same time period, the sheriff's budget has ballooned. It has exploded by $144 million in a year, or over that time period, to a whopping, last year, $443 million, which is a 48% increase, which is outrageous. You think about, if you picture this on a graph, right, you'd see the daily jail population going down, and you'd see over that exact same time period, the budget going up. There's a clear mismatch here, right? And so that's the financial side of it. More importantly, on the performance side, names got lifted up at the beginning of people who have been lost to state violence. Some of them were people who were killed inside of our Alameda County jails by our sheriff's office. I specifically want to uplift DeJuan Armstrong's name, who was brought into the room earlier. He was killed inside of the jail, and we've been working closely with his family, and they've been very much so a core part of the organizing that we've been doing with the Audit Ahern coalition. And we know that DeJuan's story is not unique, unfortunately. There have been, as far as we know, at least 43 deaths over the last few years. And those are the deaths that we know of, right? Because they're sneaky about how they count in custody deaths. And so we need more data, which is a big part of what this campaign is about, right? It's about the transparency to actually understand the policies and practices and experiences of what's going on inside. So, we have in-custody deaths that are just terrible. We also have known instances of the sheriff collaborating with ICE, with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The story that's most publicly known with that is Maria Ortega Rangel. And, this is inside of a context where the Alameda County Board of Supervisors had passed a welcoming resolution, where we have state law that declares California a sanctuary state, And yet we see Sheriff Ahern continuing to find any way possible to continue collaborating with ICE, who is terrorizing our immigrant and refugee communities. And there are also, the food inside that is served is moldy, it's inhumane. There are wild abuses around reproductive health care access, including one woman who was in labor, and she told this to a sheriff's deputy. They thought she was lying, and so they put her in solitary confinement, what they call administrative segregation, as a euphemism for solitary confinement, as if we don't have a troubled history and current context around segregation in this country. But I digress. Put her in administrative segregation, and she gave birth to her child alone on a concrete floor in solitary confinement. So these are the stories we know about, and we know for a fact that we don't know everything. So our demand is to have the county look at this as a structural problem and to understand that these are not unique cases, and we actually need to have an understanding of what the policies and practices that allow for these experiences to happen. And so 2 years ago, a group of organizations got together and decided that we were going to call for an audit of the Alameda County Sheriff's Office in an effort to get transparency and accountability, which really aligns with the APHA statement's recommendations. So what does the Audit Ahern Coalition demand? We demand that the Alameda County Board of Supervisors approves an independent financial and performance audit. The independent piece is incredibly important. We know that we can't trust data if it's coming from the county itself, and we need an outside entity to be taking this into their own hands. And we need that to happen by the end of this year. That's been the demand. My emotions are running particularly high because of a very difficult hearing that we had this morning in the county's Public Protection Committee, which basically the board president, Richard Valle, decided to stall our demand. He went back on his word that he declared just about a month ago, that he was going to advance this audit out of committee to the full board for a hearing and pass this by the end of the year. And then today he said that he needs more information and he's not going to move it forward. So we have some recalibration to do, but nonetheless, that continues to be the coalition's demand. So obviously, based on that last update, the status of the Audit Ahern campaign is tenuous if you think about it from where it stands with the electeds, right? But I actually think that the movement and the organizing that is built around this has never been stronger. We are showing up in numbers, we are showing up together, unified, calling for this audit, connecting the dots between other things that are happening in the county. And as far as as a base and as an organizing strategy, we are strong. We have been doing the work. The picture is from a radio interview. We're doing tons of media advocacy, have been doing these hearings. We've done rallies, we've done protests, and been doing the inside work too of trying to help get the Board of Supervisors up to date and get them the information that they need to be able to move forward, which we have done. We have done our due diligence, and they seem to not be listening. So, this also makes me think about this, the collective resources and the fact that the Board of Supervisors is using our taxpayer dollars to commit these atrocities. And something that Supervisor Haggerty, one of the other 5 supervisors in the county, San Francisco's the oddball in California. You're all the only ones without a 5-person Board of Supervisors. Alameda County, we have 5. Haggerty is the other person who's on the committee this morning. When we pushed him on the fact that they just approved a multi-million-dollar helicopter purchase for the sheriff's office for medical emergencies, but through the sheriff's office, his response was, well, I paid for that. Oh, out of your own pocket, out of your own bank account. No, out of my county budget. Oh, so we paid for it. And I think that orientation is incredibly important, right? The power is with the people. The taxpayer dollars are with the people. And this is really about holding people to account for the work that we elected them to do. Next slide. Okay. So how can you support? So we are going to be turning up the volume on the Board of Supervisors, and there will be plenty of opportunities over the coming months, and really probably over the coming weeks, to get involved. I think, conscious of the fact that some of y'all are in SF, the best way to get plugged in is on the slides that have all of our contact info. All of the steering committee organizations are listed on there, and so you can reach out to any of the steering committee orgs. I'm also happy to give my email address if that's easier, or my phone number. Like, y'all can, like, we can do that. But getting plugged in too, I mean, thinking about what organizations, what groups, what collectives y'all are already part of too, like bringing this conversation into those spaces, and then coming back if you have student groups, if you have, you know, whatever types of affiliations that would want to get involved in this campaign, then we can loop y'all into the coalition and think about how to do that in a systematic way. Thank you.
So listen, it's been a very successful event in terms of we have a great turnout. And if you read Alex Vitale's book, you learn that one of the origins of policing is preventing enslaved Africans from congregating together. Now, for me, that informs my analysis that the prison industrial complex is a strategy of counterinsurgency to prevent us from all coming together. We've all gathered here in this room, and according to the law, there's more than us that was supposed to be in this room. And we have a couple students that are working very diligently to find a third spillover room, which might be a little bit cooler than this one. All right, and so what I was going to ask if this feels really awkward for me because I'm Mexican, I'm Chicano, and we're just about embracing and bringing people in. But if 6 to 10 folks might feel comfortable volunteering, Doria, Mr. Ayala, and Priscilla are in the back right now. They're going to help orient folks to find where that room is at. And so I'm just going to put that out there. If anybody feels like touching base with them to find the next room, then thank you for that. Without further ado, I'm going to continue the presentation going right now. Thank you.
I also wanted to say, feel free to like get up if you need to use the bathroom. I know these long events you feel trapped. Like do whatever you need to do to be here. My name's Andrew Szeto. I'm with the No New SFGO Coalition.
My name's Nick. I'm also the No New SFGO Coalition and also Critical Resistance.
I'm also a grad student here in the Ethnic Studies Department.
I'm also an alum of SF State and Political Science. I really learned out on the streets, and especially in front of Mission Station with some folks over there.
Sure. Yeah, sorry about that.
I'll go off script and ask what does abolition mean to us? I take notes on things that I watch. This is from Ruth Wilson Gilmore. She says, abolition is presence, not absence. She says, abolition is a vision, but not a blueprint. Abolition is about the evolution of consciousness. Abolition is the narrative of changing consciousness, the thinking what and thinking how. And abolition is the work that people already do. It's not a utopian vision. You can find that quoted in Critical Resistance's latest video on YouTube. Oh yeah, next slide. So who are we? We're the No New SFGO Coalition. Our main campaign right now is around shutting down the jail at 850 Bryant, which is the Hall of Justice. We're a coalition that's been active since 2013 and includes some of the various organizations you see on the screen: the DSA San Francisco chapter, Critical Resistance, TGI Justice Project, Coalition on Homelessness, and a bunch of others. Next slide.
Next slide.
And we've been organizing since 2003, like I said. Some of the back history I'll go over really quickly is that the state of California has been funding billions of dollars into new jail expansion and jail construction for the last 10 years or so. And that had to do with a court-ordered mandate to the state of California around overcrowding in the state prisons. And so the state's effort to deal with overcrowding conditions was to actually put in billions of dollars into the county level to build new jails. And so San Francisco was one of those cities that applied for money to build and rebuild A50 Bryant, which has been seismically unsafe since 1996. But that's in conjunction with a lot of other counties, especially in the region. Contra Costa, Alameda, Santa Cruz, Sacramento, they all received millions of dollars to build new jails. Next slide. So if you're not familiar with the county jail system in San Francisco, A50 Bryant is just one jail in the system of the county jail system here. The newest one is in San Bruno. It was built in like 2006. And so, like I said, it's been deemed seismically unsafe since, A50 Bryant's been deemed seismically unsafe since 1996. But it's just a sort of one jail in a spectrum of different kinds of jails that are older and newer. Next slide.
I'm going to talk to you about the folks that are inside of A50 Bryant. These are numbers that we have. 56% are African American, even though we know that they make about 5% of our population here in Frisco. 84% pre-trial, so that means they can't pay bail. So we have a lot of folks in there that just can't afford bail because the DA and police, they overcharge folks and they rank up that bail so they can't get out. 35% are homeless, and we've seen, so in 2014, so before 2014 we saw the decreasing of the population, and then since 2014 it's been pretty steady at 1,300. We saw around then was a big increase in homelessness, police going after homeless folks, quality of life crimes, and huge time during when the Super Bowl came to town. That was when the elite cracked down real hard and sent SFPD out to round people up. A lot of folks went to A50 Bryant, and it's a revolving door because they get out and then they're back on the streets and can't pay whatever fines they were given for sleeping or doing whatever they were out in the streets because that's where they have to be, or that's where they're stuck right now. And so it's really unfortunate. Also with different props, as in like Prop C and others that were passed as quality of life issues, and where the voters decided that camping wasn't allowed, and so that's why we see more and more sweeps happening all the time. You can see the rotation from neighborhood to neighborhood of when SFPD goes through, and a lot of times, and also now, we're also seeing DPW, Department of Public Works, working with SFPD to steal people's belongings. So what they do is they're supposed to do a bag and tag program, which they don't do, and what they do instead is just take their items and throw them away, and that could be, you know, life-saving things. Those could be memories. I mean, people have suddenly lost parents' ashes, they've lost their only photos of folks, and also even valuables, which Department of Public Works folks even steal and sell. And also, we have seen over the years the increased hiring of police officers in SFPD, and that is also very much correlated with why there's not more folks coming out of A50 Bryant and more folks going in. Because if you hire police officers, that's what they're supposed to do, is lock people up. They build a jail, what's it supposed to be for? To fill up. So that's why we're saying we need to close that. 40% of folks in jails see psychiatric services, because there's not enough beds at general, and we don't put enough money into our mental health services. There's a large portion, I think it's about 25% of people in the jail are severely mentally ill, which by medical standards they should not be in those areas, but because there's not enough beds at general, they wait in A50 Bryant for months on end to be finally taken over there when the bed does open up. And then we also have about 30% of transitional age youth as well being locked up, which we know these should not be in jails or cages at all. Next slide.
I totally skipped like a really important part of our campaign history, which is that so San Francisco did apply for $80 million to build the new jail. In 2015, our coalition actually stopped the new jail, which is a humongous victory. The first county in the state to actually reject money for jail construction, the first county to stop the new jail. In the last month or two, actually, LA County has canceled their contract to build a new women's jail, and then Sacramento County 2 weeks ago actually canceled their contract. So they were awarded the money, but organizing, even in the last 6 months, has actually done enough to stop the jail construction. This picture sort of just like kind of helps reiterate like the kind of racial disparities of policing and imprisonment in San Francisco. And this is true of a lot of different kind of statistics, but this is an infographic of where folks who are booked into the county jail system, which neighborhoods they come from. And so you can see Excelsior, Bayview, Mission, Fillmore, and Tenderloin. And so it's not a coincidence that the jail population is the way that it is. Yeah, next slide. Oh, I guess I could have said the timeline stuff right here, but this is a sort of a brief timeline of our organizing. You can't really see it, but you can go on our website and find it. It's a lot of it has been a very slow process in our organizing, but getting to this point where right now we're demanding to shut down 850 Bryant comes out of the last 3 years since 2015, where we got the city to reject the funding for the new jail, and so there's no new jail being built. How do we, what does our organizing need to do now? Which is, for us, was to decarcerate the jail system, was to figure out how to stop the criminalization of homelessness, of quality of life crimes, which is leading to some of the things that we're seeing in the jail population remaining the same or spiking up and down because of the homeless sweeps. A lot of this, so the city created this work group. It didn't really solve anything. They made a lot of promises to increase funding for housing, mental health services, and things like that. But it didn't. So yeah. Next slide. So one of the big things that we're doing, we did this last budget cycle, was to identify how much the city spends to incarcerate people in our county jail system. And we found that 23% of the general fund, which is the next slide will show you how much, went towards criminalization. So that's about $66 million that the city of San Francisco spends on, that could be spending their money on housing, mental health care, and community-based services, but are not. Next slide. All of this is to say that our goals, even though we're an abolitionist coalition, but abolition isn't just a utopian dream. I think in San Francisco, the organizing that we're doing in coalition is to work towards a healthier San Francisco, a safer San Francisco that doesn't involve policing and imprisonment. All of the things that we've been doing in our coalition since 2013 are things that are practical and that are possible. And so our demand to shut down 850 Bryant is not like a dream that we want to happen like far away. We want it to happen now, and we know it can happen now.
It's important to say that we need it to happen now, because what happens at 850 Bryant does move back out into the street. We saw it in the case of Mario Woods, where he was locked up, and unfortunately he developed a mental health issue in the jail, which a lot of people do. It's not a place you can live sustainably or even have proper health care given to you. Being in a cage is not a place where you can be helped. And then he came out into the streets, where he came back. The community was there for him. He was getting a job, but he still had that trauma from being in 850 Bryant. And that's what led to the scenario that the SFPD comes and murdered him. And so it's important that we close 850 Bryant, because it is also part of police violence, is part of the system that is hurting our communities and keeping black and brown folks at the bottom. All right, I'll go over demands and plan of action. One, we increase affordable housing, including supportive housing. I think we all agree with that. Let's take those rents down. get on with landlords. Fully fund comprehensive mental health and substance use treatment services. Creation of additional hospital treatment beds. And they're trying to take away the beds, but we need more and more. So we need to keep on fighting with that. And shout out to folks working at General who are, protesting and telling City Hall that they need more services, they need more money. Take that out of the SFPD budget. They don't need any more money. They don't deserve that money. They keep on killing folks. They keep on harassing folks. So we need to make sure we go to London Breed and let her know that, because London Breed loves SFPD. Decriminalize the quality of life charges. End to police harassment of homeless folks. And that's, we can all do a part of that. We've seen people that film, people that call out SFPD. If you see them harassing somebody, stop, check it out, let SFPD know that they're being watched. And then end pretrial detention as well. People that can't afford bail, that's not fair for them to stay there, We got rich folks that, rich white folks that have money that can just get out of jail whenever the hell they want or not even go. But we have folks that are there just because they can't afford it, We've had folks who raise money through the community and get out, but not everybody has that system where they can do that.
Something that just came up recently is that the mayor of London Breed is proposing to close down 850 Bryant by 2021, and she wants to do this by building what she calls a justice campus in its place. So what will happen is there will be a new jail with locked facilities for folks with mental health needs. And so we're completely against, our coalition is completely against any renovation of a jail. So we just don't want any new jails in San Francisco. No renovating old jails and no building this justice campus or any jail by another name. London Breed's also been threatening to send folks in the county jail system to Santa Rita, and you just all heard how horrendous that jail system is. And so part of our demand is to make sure that folks aren't moved out of county if and when 850 Bryant is shut down. And then also something that we've also been noticing is that electronic monitoring, which is when you get an ankle shackle as a condition of your release before your trial or instead of jail time, is that we've seen it increase about 300% over the last year, but the jail population actually has remained the same. And so a lot of times reformers will say electronic monitoring is one way to decarcerate the jail population, but we're actually seeing is that more people are given electronic monitoring shackles, and it's not actually reducing the jail population. So that's something that we're really concerned about. Next slide. And
to get involved, you can join our coalition. Come talk to Andrew and I or Michael in the back, who's got a bunch of awesome stickers. I hope to see you all slap around the city, and definitely here at SF State. Sign up to our letter demanding that supervisors close 850 Bryant, that they stick to their word because they have said that they would, so they need to keep on moving with that. Meet with and call your supervisors. They like hearing from you, and it's very important that you do let them know that you care about these issues. Spread the word about our campaign. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and then there you go. Follow us at Shutdown 850 Bryant. We put a lot of stuff there. We'll have more actions, and yeah, let's do this.
Jay, I'm going to stand up over here.
Sure.
If that's all right.
Handle. And you need to get the mic in.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
There's a lot of people sitting. I wanted to be able to see everybody, and been sitting a lot today. I am very honored to be here. I want to give a special thanks to Che and Ron and everybody who brought us all together here. And I want to say how honored I am to be with folks who I've been in struggle with in the past and folks that I hope to be in struggle with in the future. And that these are not just abstract ideas to me. I've been incarcerated at both Santa Rita and 850 Bryant Street. For those who don't know, I lived here for a number of years and worked at the San Francisco Coalition on Homelessness in the early 90s, which is how I got started doing this work in a lot of ways. And I want to tell a little story about that. One of the, well, let me say this. Everyone who ends up incarcerated first gets arrested by police. And so we have to understand the centrality of policing to all these struggles, as we've heard in many of the demands today. And I want to tell a story about an arrest that resulted in my being at 850 Bryant Street that helped me frame a lot of my thinking ultimately about these issues. So I don't normally tell this story, and so I don't want you to think this is like a story about, oh, he got arrested and therefore, but that it tells us something about the way this system operates. So it's not really a story about me, it's a story about the system. So I got arrested on more than one occasions for giving out free food to homeless people. I was working at the Homeless Coalition, but I was also volunteering with a group called Food Not Bombs. And at that time, shout out to Food Not Bombs, great. And this is in the late 80s and early 90s. And at that time, there was an encampment of homeless folks living outside City Hall in Civic Center Plaza, in the park in front of City Hall. And we had a very liberal mayor at the time, Art Agnos. How many people remember Art Agnos? From yes, we're showing our age. And Art Agnos, you know, he was a state senator before mayor, and before that, he was a social worker. He was trained as a social worker, and seemed very fitting for San Francisco to have a social worker mayor. But I quickly learned what the limits were of a kind of liberal politics that he embodied. And it included getting arrested for trying to give free food to homeless people. We were set up in Civic Center Plaza to support the encampment, and the mayor decided that people had to either go into social services or into shelters and be part of this apparatus of fixing homelessness, or they would be subjected to criminalization. The fact that there weren't enough programs, there weren't enough shelter beds somehow seemed to slip his attention, but when he opened a new multi-service center, he said, that's it, we're driving you out of here, and they criminalized those of us who were supporting the encampment by arresting us because we did not have the proper health permits, which didn't exist and were not possible to get. This taught me something about the limits of this liberal framing of the problems we face as a country, especially in our cities, but really all across the country. And it's not a story about bad policing. The police who arrested me were not abusive for the most part, but what they were doing was a form of abusive politics. And that's really a story I want to tell, a story about politics, not really a story about policing. Because the liberal framework that was running the city then and is running the city now in a lot of important ways was driven by two really powerfully problematic understandings of the world. The first is a kind of legal formalism that says if we can just apply the law equally to everyone, that we'll all be better off. And the second is a capitulation to austerity politics. The idea that we can't really make the city the way we want because the forces of capital will rebel and therefore we're stuck. And it is the embracing of that second that always leads to the first. So, one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that the legal system, when properly implemented, is not automatically in everyone's best interest. There's a famous 19th century saying that the law in its majesty forbids both the rich and the poor from sleeping under bridges, begging in the streets, and stealing bread. But of course the rich don't need to do these things. The law is not designed to represent the interests of everyone equally, and we can see this most clearly with the drug law. We've had this war on drugs for over 50 years, and drugs are cheaper and easier to get than they've ever been. We've got massive overdose problems. Any young person in America can get drugs anytime they want them. If your grades here at SF State required you to obtain illegal drugs, is there anybody here who would be at risk of failing? Who doesn't know who they would call to get that right? So the war on drugs has never been about public safety. It has never been about public health. It has never saved any lives. It has never prevented anyone from having access to drugs, because it was never about that. It was about a cynical politics of race. It was a way for the federal government, and in particular, at a particular historical moment, the Nixon administration, to appeal to white voters in the South to switch from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. They had lost the war to hold on to segregation and Jim Crow, and they blamed the Democrats for that, and they said to white voters, don't worry, we'll use the war on drugs and the war on crime to criminalize those communities, and that will be how we keep them down. And we know this because people from within the Nixon administration have come public and said, we were in the meetings, this was the conversation we were having. It had nothing to do with public health or public safety. It had nothing to do with drugs. It was about a politics of race. And a totally lawful, professional, friendly, unbiased drug arrest is going to ruin some young person's life for no damn good reason. There is no justice in it. But the liberal legal formalists think that the problems of policing can be fixed with implicit bias training and de-escalation training and more money for more equipment and more training, and maybe, yes, we hold a couple of officers accountable for some egregious misdeed, but the mission of policing remains unchanged. And the tens of thousands of low-level arrests here in the Bay Area, the millions, the tens of millions of these arrests across the country, so many of them are totally unjust in their substance. And the way in which those arrests are carried out is really not the issue. The issue is mass criminalization of those who are at the losing end of the kinds of economic arrangements that we have been subjected to. Mass homelessness, mass unemployment, where people turn to black markets of drug dealing and sex work and stealing stuff. And we have criminalized those populations. And so they tell us, well, don't worry, we're going to make the police nicer, friendlier, more professional, follow the law more carefully, so that you'll quit complaining, and that we will restore your trust in police. And this is what comes out of the mouth of these police reformers. That's what's in the Obama Police Reform Task Force, etc. Well, I'm here today to tell you not to trust the police. That is not my job, to figure out how to fix policing so that you will trust them. Because they are not here to serve your interests, and they never really have been. Implicit bias imagines that the problems of race and policing are about bad individual unconscious decision-making by random individual police officers. That it's implicit, it's unintentional, it's unconscious, and we're really sorry, and we'll give you some training and try to shoot fewer black people next time. But there's so many problems with this. First of all, we got a problem of explicit racism in policing in the United States. When we look for racism in policing, we find it. The chat boards, the emails, the radio communications, the tattoos that the LA sheriff's guys have got, right? I mean, this is not accidental implicit racism.
The text messages in SFPD.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So the problem is so much deeper than that. And even goes beyond this idea of individual officer decision-making because it's built into the mission of policing. This is why hiring more black and brown police officers is not going to save us. Because they're still carrying out the substantially unjust missions of a war on drugs and a war on gangs and a war on immigrants and a war on crime and a war on terrorism. And when they're waging war on the public, they're not going to be nice and friendly. It's not possible, in part because people resist them, because these wars are unjust. And when people resist, the police will escalate. And of course, that's what happened to Eric Garner in New York. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He just resisted their authority, and they used the force that they felt they needed to use to control him. So the other problem we have is this commitment to austerity politics. The idea that the city is incapable of really addressing the problems that we face, like mass homelessness and untreated mental health problems and substance abuse and failing schools and inadequate youth services. But somehow, there's always money for another jail, hire some more police. They want to hire 500 more police for the transit system in New York because too many people are jumping the turnstiles and there are too many homeless people sleeping on the subway. So the trains don't work on time. We got all kinds of service problems, but they're pouring $250 million a year into hiring more police, which by itself could house literally thousands of homeless people and provide them with support services. So it's not because there's no money, it's because they don't want to spend the money on the folks who need it. And one of the forms this takes is community policing. Who could be against community policing? You know, don't we want the police to know the community, to understand the dynamics of the community? The problem is that the fundamental concept of community policing is that the community is supposed to bring all its problems to the police to fix. But what tools do the police have to fix our community problems? They got guns and handcuffs and ticket books and threats and coercion and violence and harassment. Do they have affordable housing? Do they have mental health services? Do they have access to high-quality medical substance abuse treatment? No, they don't have any of the things that we actually need. So I'm not interested in trying to be nicer to the police or have the police be nicer to me or to have them solve all my problems. I'm interested in having real solutions to my problems. I'm interested in demanding that we actually get the basic things that we need. Why can't we have high-quality drug treatment on demand? Why can't we have adequate mental health services? Why don't our children have high-quality schools and high-quality after-school activities? Because they've taken all the money and either given it to the most successful parts of the economy and the richest people in it, or to the police to make sure that we don't complain about those arrangements. And this is why we should never invest 2 cents of our political energy into demanding reforms of the police. What we have to do is to get them out of our lives. And this doesn't mean just flipping a switch one day and then there are no police. It means demanding the things our communities need so that they can be healthy and sustainable places for everyone in them. So that we don't have the kinds of problems that we've turned to the police to solve or that the city has told us we have to use the police to fix. So we've got to quit yelling at the police commission as much as we may hate them and as much as they, oppose our values, and focus on why we can't have the things we want. What is standing in the way of the Board of Supervisors and the mayor giving us what we really want? And that is about community organizing. And it has to be a positive, aspirational message, not just, we hate the cops, close down the jail. As much as we want to point out the harms that those institutions cause, the way to build political power is with a positive message about making people and communities stronger. And this work is going on around the country. I was in Salinas earlier this year where they have an amazing Build Healthy Communities campaign underway there, where they're making these kinds of demands to the specific politicians who claim to be their friends and aren't, who tell them they can't have these things, but they've got money to put more police in the schools, to open up another youth detention facility, etc. And we got to call bullshit on these politicians who think that if they come out with us on the picket line when someone gets killed by police, that they get a free pass on everything else. And then they go back to the city council chamber and vote for more police or vote to cut mental health services. We got to be clear on what the real demands are and what's really going to make us stronger, safer, and healthier. Thank you.
All right, folks, so at this point now what we can do is open up for questions. And just a little bit, this is one of the things that we did in my classes that Carlos survived, right here to my left, is that what we say is that we can say or ask anything that we want in the classroom, as in this space as well, so long as we share with respect for the different walks of life in the room, and also secondly that we provide examples to help other people understand our logic. And the other thing I'm going to say about this is because these events, you know, somebody gets the mic as I'm doing right now, we go along with it as I'm doing right now. So I'm going to ask you to, can you fit your question in a tweet or two? All right, just so we don't go a little bit too overboard. But with that being said, do folks have questions right now? We've got a great panel. There's a great brain trust right here. I'd like to open up to folks to go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Kim. I'm part of the nursing program here at State, and I appreciate everything that you all have brought up. My question is very simple. I think that I'm an activist myself, and I think that a lot of what we do is very important, but more important is how do we empower the people that we're talking about. Of course, we are empowering ourselves as we do this work, as we train ourselves, as we educate ourselves, but my concern is what happens to the people when we abolish the prisons? What happens and how are we creating the kind of society that is going to give us the equality, economic equality, the post-capitalist society that I hear you guys actually asking for, if I'm correct in everybody's analysis, because we can't have abolishment of prisons in a capitalist society. It serves a particular purpose, the policing and the prisons, for this economic system. So how are we in these movements empowering the people that should be running the society instead of the 1%? That's for all of you guys.
And there's a microphone there. If anyone wants to care to pick it up.
All right. I just, well, and this is blinking red. Does that mean that, is it on?
Just press that button.
There we go. There's a button there.
Yeah.
Let's talk. Technology. Okay, thank you. So, my vision is precisely that. It's a vision of community organizing. It's not about a set of technocratic solutions to like how do we reduce the jail population by 15% by changing the bail by $100 and create. No, this is about building power. And that means, though, that we have to have campaigns that we can run in communities where people are really living their lives and struggling. And so it's a challenge to figure. What they did in Salinas and what they've done is they start with a kind of community assessment. They go out and they talk to people, and they have town